It is Tuesday. It's noon. We are going to do a Tuesday Tips live edition today with Behaijoub from London. I am super excited. Um, I love Instagram because it's like, we're telling your followers that you've started a live video. Well, awesome. Oh, and Jem has joined and she sent a request to be in my video, which is excellent because we are going to be talking about social media today. We're going to be talking about emotional intelligence today. And I am super excited to talk to her. Joining us as we speak. Jem. I cannot wait to see this woman, I have to tell you. Hey,
Hello.
how you doing?
Hi. I'm good. Oh, it's so lovely to see your face.
Same. Do I sound okay with these like silly heads the silly headset?
Yeah, you sound great. Yeah, you sound
Okay,
absolutely great.
perfect.
I think there's a
Awesome.
little bit of
How?
a delay, but that's it. I think it's a slight delay. And look, we can put filters on our face as well. We can be like
Oh,
extra
we
silly if we
can.
want to be.
This is the
Yeah,
joy
you know,
of
if I just
having a
have a little
social. What are you gonna
shine
do? Let's
or,
see.
oh yeah, no, I don't want people to see me like that. But yeah, when we talk about EQ, I'm like, well, she hasn't got a very high EQ. She's putting filters on. Oh yeah, no.
No.
Just messing about here. There you go. Look, there we go.
Okay, so wait a minute. When we do the filters, you can do a separate filter from me, or
Yeah.
when you apply a filter, it's for both of us.
No, it's for me. You can apply one for you. So on your screen, you should have a little happy face at the top of your screen.
Yeah.
And if you press
Oh,
on that, it comes up with all these filters at the bottom. Oh, there you go. You're shining.
yeah, I'm feeling very kind of 80s. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
this is
like
this is
it.
working
Me
for
too.
me.
I mean, you don't
You
need
like
a
it?
filter. Yeah, you don't need a
Oh,
filter.
please.
So, but it's
Oh,
fun.
please.
It's fun.
Oh, wait a minute. That's the joy of doing this Instagram live from home today is that, I've got the chihuahuas in the background, which was the number one reason for this. But hopefully, once they realize that the male person has gone, I knew that this would happen. The male person normally comes at like 5 o'clock these days, but today, if they're going to be here at noon,
Yeah. Well,
right?
I'll have my kids interrupt.
That sounds perfect. Oops,
Oh, I'm back.
you're back. I had a little
I'm
circle
back.
on your
Sorry.
face for a second. All good.
Yeah. I think
Maybe that's the
there we go.
problem with
I'm
my.
here.
Oh,
I'm here.
yeah. Oh, Michael says that maybe that's the problem with my social media, not enough filters. Yeah, filter your social media. Well, speaking of that, we're talking about a couple of things today. So today, Jem is a social media expert. She lives in London. I have worked with Jem. How long have we worked together off and on? Like when was
Oh
it that you
God.
lived in Chicago? Is it?
It must be 8 years now that because I moved back to London 3 years ago, but I was in Chicago for 5 years. Oh, I say 5 years we've worked together because I met you a couple of years after I moved to Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, 5 years. Yeah. And I was
Chicago
thinking back,
misses
I
you.
was trying to think back to all the stuff we've done. So I first started working with you when on your marketing as you were doing a sort of rebrand for Melissa Thornley Consulting. And then I used your services just before I moved back to London to help me kind of hit the ground running when I moved back in terms of like my business. So we're really familiar with each other's services. Like we have hired each other.
We've hired each other. That's right.
We've hired
That's
each other.
what,
We can vouch for each other.
well,
Oh
and that's
God.
what womenpreneurs do. And that's what small businesses do. We support other small
Oh
businesses,
my God,
especially
there's
like when
something
it
growing on my
works.
face. Sorry, there
Oh
was
my
something
gosh. Yeah,
growing on my face.
you've got a growth. You've got like an issue there. What's this one?
That was scary. That was gross. I was a bit freaked
That one
out
was
there.
kind of gross. This one
Yeah,
is
that
kind
was
of
gross.
intergalactic. I'm kind of digging the intergalactic
Yeah,
look here.
this one's cool.
Okay, so speaking of these like little tricks and filters, what's something that you are really loving right now as far as social media goes? Is there like a fun app or a fun new trend? Like what are you loving about social media right now?
Well, there's always new trends and there's always new things that come into a market. And I'm always I'm a bit of a wait and see type of person when it comes to new social media trends, in the sense that there's so many of them that have been introduced and died out, that I never recommend to my clients straight away to start using like the next big thing until it's been tested a little bit longer. Although I will
Yeah.
always obviously dive in and have an experiment. So um, I'm loving Reels on Instagram. I kind of feel like, so Instagram suffered a little bit of FOMO with TikTok and this whole explosion with short form video content and portrait short form video content. So Instagram introduced its own version, and that has exploded on Instagram, and is now kind of like the number one form on Instagram to use if you want to grow your following. But at the same time, it's one of those formats that doesn't always lend itself to every single industry or every single person. Um, obviously it lends itself really well to the fashion industry. I have a client who's a fashion influencer, and she just produces the most amazing reels. It lends itself really well to beauty. And obviously you can do a lot of talking heads with it as well. So there is possibilities for everybody, but I know that some people find it cringy as well. So I think it kind of depends on your personality. Like but I love reels. I think reels are fun. I don't know if you've experimented with them at all.
It's funny. I recently did an Instagram live the other day when I was just like thinking about TikTok and using TikTok, and TikTok lets you go a minute, right? Whereas Reels only lets you go 30 seconds. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I should try Reels. Like I feel like I should. So, but whenever I feel like I should, then I'm like, do I have to? But I did a poll, and most people I know, if they go on TikTok, they're not going on TikTok to look for any services or help or anything. They're going on TikTok to look at a puppy. They're going. So I feel like to have a version of that in Instagram where you can actually add value, it's like if it adds value and it's fun, then I'm down. If it doesn't add value and it's not fun, then I'm like, why bother? But I feel like
Yeah.
it could add value.
Yeah, I think it can add value. I think people just have to work out what's right for them. I follow some great Instagram accounts, and they still offer loads of value, and they don't do any reels. So I don't feel that you have to jump on it just because it is the big thing. It kind of whatever fits your brand personality. Although every other social media expert will probably say, no, you have to do reels. Well, you might have to do reels if all you want to do is increase your followers, but you also have to do something that fits your brand identity, and also something that, especially if you're a solo entrepreneur, that you feel comfortable with. So if you're not comfortable with reels, then what's the alternative? I mean, live streaming, IG lives have a huge amount of value, and it's a great way of reaching your audiences. So maybe that's your thing instead.
Right. I mean, I tend to like longer form opportunities so that you can go like a little bit deeper with things. But I suppose you can use Reels to then support a different part of the campaign, right? If you do if
Yes.
you've got an IGTV channel, then you use Reels to support that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. Sort of, you can be a little bit more intellectual with the IGTVs, and then the reels are those snappy, bite-size, digestible, like almost sound bites. And they do have value, but some of them sometimes, you don't have to dance in a reel. We don't all have to dance in reels. We can just talk to the camera and be serious. And there are some people
Yeah.
that feel the need that they have to dance in a reel, and they really don't have to unless they're a dancer. I think that reels and TikTok is just this huge trend towards short form content, and I feel like the attention span on social media has got shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. I'm not sure it's a healthy sign, but it's the way the market is moving. So
Yeah.
I do think that now that we've still, obviously YouTube is still hugely popular. We've still got live streaming. I just think, thank goodness for those types of formats that do allow that more critical thought and critical discussions.
Yeah.
which we both appreciate. And speaking of critical thought and critical discussions, both of us are, if anybody has questions about either social media or emotional intelligence, you can comment in there. You can comment in the comment area and we will answer them. But meanwhile, Jem and I are asking each other questions. So I asked Jem, and now it's Jem's turn to ask me a question if she has one.
Yeah, well, I'm fascinated by emotional intelligence. And it's funny because earlier on when I was writing it down, I shortened it to EI. And I thought, hang on a second, is that the right way to shorten it or is it EQ? So that's a question for you. What's the right way to shorten it? Because and then I Googled it and it's like, no, you can be an EI coach. But
Yeah,
that's not my
it's
question. My question is is emotional intelligence something that you're born with or something that you can actually nurture in yourself?
So this is, yeah. So the answer to both of your questions are yes, right? Yes, 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 yes. So with I see EQ because a lot of people think about IQ, and so
Yeah.
EQ, IQ, and then, but when people are thinking about emotional intelligence, a lot of times they just say emotional, they say EI. So that's the yes and the yes to that one. To whether we're born with it and or whether we develop it, it's both. So yes, we can develop all of these skills. They're emotional intelligence skills. Our brains have this thing called neuroplasticity. We can grow, we can evolve, we can practice skills and new skills and adapt, right? At the same time, sometimes people don't like to talk about this so much because it seems a little fatalistic, but we all have a natural temperament, right? We have tendencies towards being an extrovert or an introvert. So we are born with certain temperaments, but that does not lock you in. Emotional intelligence is developed over time. So it just takes looking at your life, seeing if you're getting the results that you want in your life, and kind of assessing, okay, what emotional intelligence skills am I looking to develop? Do I want to be able to express myself more? Do I want some more so like assertiveness, self-expression? Do I want to feel more empathy? Do I want to be a more empathetic leader? There are different skills that we can leverage and different capacities that we can grow. So that's a yes, yes to that question.
Yeah. And do you think that emotional intelligence is something that has been associated, I say stereotypically, more with women than men? Or are you say, I mean, it should be genderless, obviously, but I'm just, in terms of when you study it, what are the sort of theories around that?
No, that's a great question, Jem, because a lot of people think about emotional intelligence as being intelligent about emotions or being emotional, or it's just about the emotions. And that's not the case. I feel like there are gender differences because there are societal differences and
Yeah.
there are different levels of what's acceptable and what's not. So, for example, if you're looking at the area of self-expression, oftentimes women are nurtured and it's more acceptable to be emotionally expressive and not necessarily assertive, right? So they may be able to express how they're feeling and they may not feel as comfortable taking action based on that feeling in an assertive way. Whereas men might stereotypically be more assertive and take that action or request that action and not necessarily express the emotions that are driving or underlying that emotion. So it's a combination. So that's one area where if you look at those two specific aspects of emotional intelligence, there's a little bit of a gender tendency. And I think that we are seeing as with all types of gender questioning and gender fluidity and gender shifting over time, that we're seeing it change. We're seeing it change in leadership. We're seeing it be more acceptable for women to be more assertive. We're seeing it more acceptable for men to share their emotions. And it is happening over the course of generations.
Yeah, I know. And it's really inspiring. I mean, having leaders like Jacinta Ardern in New Zealand, who, obviously has a very high EQ, and is such an amazingly empathetic leader and unapologetic leader as well. I think she's a great example of leadership that that is led with what I always think of in when I think of emotional intelligence, I think of empathy as well. Like that's the first thing that pops into my mind is someone that can lead with empathy. So yeah, so I think that obviously we've got her and we've got some other female leaders and who have led the the world through the COVID crisis quite successfully in comparison to some, you know, other male leaders who haven't, I would say, not so much of a high EQ. I don't want to get into politics here, but we all
But
know
both
who we're
of
talking
us,
about here.
yeah, there are a couple. There are a couple gentlemen that come to mind. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't remember what my point was there, actually. I just kind of veered off, and oh, that was it. It was the Jacinta love. Yes. Anyway, all the Jacinta love. But when I think about leadership, and I think of a perfect example of a female leader with a high EQ, I think of someone like Jacinta Ardern, who's kind of just unapologetically herself, but also very empathetic in the way, in her leadership style, which I think is really, really inspiring.
It is, because it's, yeah, we need to have examples of that, right? If you don't have examples of it, you don't. Michelle Obama, you know, a similar thing. Like, if you don't have that example, it's hard to, what's the phrase? It's hard to be it if you can't see it, you know?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, Michelle Obama is another great example of a fantastic, of a leader with a high EQ. Absolutely. So do you think that social media is eroding EQ? I mean, because some people would say it is. And, you know, this attention economy that we live in right now, where, you know, if a video is longer than 15 seconds, then suddenly you've lost us. You know, how does that contribute or detract from trying to create more, trying to nurture more traits, EQ traits, or trying to nurture EQ in an individual?
So I love this question too. So there are different ways to look at it. On one level, social media offers the opportunity to put more out there and to increase awareness around different types of, whether it's emotional intelligence skills, whether it's making certain feelings or emotions more acceptable or relevant. You know, I like the ability to increase awareness, and social media definitely can do that. Ooh, let's see, how can develop, okay, Starcevich, Mr. Michael Starcevich, I will get to that question. That's a great question. How can developing EQ, EI improve social media effectiveness?
Ooh, I love
we'll
that
get
question.
to that one. That's a great question. So I think that it can increase awareness. I think, and I don't know that this is necessarily an impact on emotional intelligence, but it is an impact on all of us in terms of perfectionism, right? So oftentimes in social media, everybody is putting their best foot forward. They're not typically putting all of like their garbage or all of their shadow stuff on their Instagram channel or their Twitter feed or whatever. Well, maybe on Twitter they are, but typically we see it and then we start doing this comparison thing. And so I think that can be unhealthy, but I don't know that it is directly impacting your ability to express your emotions. It might, but it hopefully is not. And hopefully social media is seen as just simply a tool. It's just another channel that we have to express ourselves. So, you know, I'll look at this question from Michael from the emotional intelligence standpoint, and then I'd love to hear it from Jem from your social media standpoint. But in terms of developing emotional intelligence to improve your social media effectiveness, one of the aspects of emotional intelligence is your self-perception, right? It's how you regard yourself. It's how you perceive yourself. It's whether or not you're actualizing yourself and growing, and how aware you are of your own emotions. So if you are developing that aspect of yourself and you have a deep understanding, and then you start to leverage other emotional skills or emotional intelligence skills like self-expression. Obviously, social media is all about self-expression. So there's the opportunity to be assertive and to be independent and to shine. So those areas I think are really helpful. And also the empathy aspect of it. So if you are on social media and you start to follow people who aren't like yourself, then you have the capacity to grow your empathy through learning about other cultures, other genders, other races, anybody that's not like you. It's like, if we all took the opportunity to use social media like an encyclopedia, then I think the opportunity to grow our empathy is huge. And then we can then in turn express that empathy through what we're creating on social media. So that's my take on it.
I think that unfortunately, a lot of the time, social media can turn, especially on Facebook, it can turn into a bit of an echo chamber, especially on your personal Facebook feed. When it comes to politics and the world that you know, there's typically, and I think politics is a great example of how many people blocked other people for having different political opinions of themselves. And I just think, well, I'm sure that person really annoys you, but you're not achieving anything by just blocking people on social media because they don't agree with you. You should be engaging in dialogue if you can, or don't engage in dialogue, but also, you know, acknowledge the fact that someone else has got a different opinion than you. And I have a very good example of a friend of mine who's in Houston, a very, very close friend. She's got completely different political views to me. And she has unfortunately been blocked by people on social media who don't agree with her. And you know, I've always said to her, I will challenge you, but I will never stop. Like, I know you're a good person, but I will always challenge you, but I will never ever stop. I will never block you or not want you to not want to be friends with you. Like, as long as we can have healthy dialogue, then, you know, I'm going to learn something, you're going to learn something. And isn't that the whole point? Is to see those different opinions.
Yeah.
And then there's this great quote that I saw recently, which just said, follow people who look differently to you on social media. And I just thought,
Yep.
yeah, actually, that's what we all need to do. We all need to follow some people who look different to us, who say different things to us, just to get a much more, like, sort of holistic view of the world.
Yeah. I love that. Right. Using it as a bridge, using social media as a bridge, as opposed to a cocoon, right? Cocooning
Yes.
ourselves with all the, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of the question with regards to using EQ to increase social media effectiveness, and I think you hit the nail on the head really, Melissa, of saying that, you know, when you lead with empathy with your target audience, and it's worth me sort of saying that my opinion comes from working with small business owners who want to sell themselves on social media. So I'm not talking about individuals. So I'm talking about small business owners that really want to reach their target audiences more effectively. And leading with empathy and talking to their audiences' challenges and pain points is a really, really great way of selling yourself. So there is a way that EQ can be used effectively. And you can see in people's writing styles and you know, whether they're speaking from the heart and whether they're listening and they're open and they're self-aware, and when they're not. So yes, I think absolutely it can be used, and I think that it's probably the ultimate tool for social media effectiveness. It's probably very undervalued. Definitely work. Yeah.
This thing just popped into my head. That's kind of like a mini, like, in a way, a mini case study. So one of the things with social media, and especially when you're a small business, is, you know, being aware of what the national holidays are, the social media holidays, all of that, kind of staying on top of trends and that type of thing. And so but tying it into your brand and making relevant comments, right? And so a few weeks ago, I saw that it was the National Abortion Providers Day, and it was like a literal holiday that honored one of the doctors that was murdered, and they turned it into like a holiday to celebrate people who provide abortions. So I was thinking about this, and I'm like, okay, this is like, could potentially be a topic that catalyzes people and divides people. And do I want to go there? And how do I handle it? And how does it actually tie into emotional intelligence? And the more I read about the holiday and celebrating these people that put their lives on the line, that are there for a healthcare service for people, the more I realized that it was definitely something that I wanted to acknowledge. And so I did it. I even did it on LinkedIn, which felt a little bit putting it out there, because it was like, you know, am I going to get a bunch of flack for this? And ultimately, I thought about it as a brand and as what and in terms of what I stand for as a human and as a business. And there's a whole level of emotional intelligence to being able to lead in that way and take those roles on in support of other humans. So I just thought, okay, it does make sense, but it took me a long time to kind of process that and decide whether or not I was going to post about it. And that's obviously one post in one day. And so there's the one question about, like, when it comes to taking a stand in social media, because so many more people are doing it because of the world that we live in. What's your suggestion on doing that in a way that feels true? And then also the like a very simple question, which is, how do you just keep up with posting consistently and having consistent messaging, because it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And overwhelm is probably the biggest issue that my clients come to me with is overwhelm, but also accountability as well. But I'd say overwhelm is definitely the number one issue that a lot of small business owners come to me. So there's two questions there. So the first one was, and I think you kind of answered it when you were talking, and that was, how do you celebrate certain awareness days or hashtag holidays authentic in a way that doesn't seem like we're jumping on a bandwagon? And there are some ridiculous hashtag holidays out there which can be like there seems to be a hashtag holiday for everything. We could start one today if you want. Start one today, Melissa. Let's have a think. But yeah,
Gem Day.
Again, you have to be really aware of your own brand values, your business values, and your philosophy, and it's self-awareness. It's about knowing what your mission is, knowing what your philosophy is, what your business values are, and then asking yourself what speaks to those. And whatever speaks to them and fits into that identity, then yes, you should celebrate it on social media because it's meaningful for you. So the answer is reasonably straightforward, but obviously there are a lot of people who will just be like, yeah, it's International Women's Day. And then that's it, And I'm like, but do you understand how long this has been going on for and what's been achieved and what the history, so there is a little bit of tokenism involved with it all, but that's to be expected. So it's really, it's all down to self-awareness as a business owner, and applying that self-awareness to those awareness. See, it's all about awareness. I keep on repeating that word. Applying it to those awareness weeks and awareness days. So being authentic, and I know that sounds like a cliche saying, like, be authentic on social media, because a lot of people say that, but it's that in that case it really is true. So that's my opinion on that thing. And then you were talking about how do you
dealing with the overwhelm and the consistency, and it's almost like the decision-making process of posting.
Yes, and that the decision-making process should be seen as the strategy process. And a lot of people, what I find is they post and they don't have a strategy in place. They haven't taken a step back from social media and from their business to say, like, okay, well, who are my target audience and what platforms are they on? What are their needs? What are my goals and how can I achieve those? What are my resources? I think that's very important, because obviously a solo entrepreneur is going to have very different resources for social media marketing than a startup company that's been, given a huge grant, or even, a large company that has an entire team to be able to implement a plan. So resources, I think, is really, really important. But yeah, so I'm a big believer in, there's two things that I believe in, that if you're overwhelmed, and just starting small and building up, because it's often a case of confidence. So, if you can't post every single day, then don't post every single day, but choose when you are going to post and be consistent with that. Because it sets up a routine, but it also sets up an expectation for your audience. And it just means that you can start to review and refine your strategy a little bit more, because you can see like what days perform well, what types of content performs well. So I would say definitely quality over quantity. You don't always have to be everywhere to begin with. And then as your confidence and your resources grow, you can then consider branching out to other platforms that are relevant to your business. But I also a big believer that it's much better to show up imperfectly consistently than to show up perfectly inconsistently, if that makes sense.
It does. That's so funny because I am like guilty, so guilty on the consistency part. And sometimes I'll feel like, man, this is just a rock star post, but it just feels like, and because a lot of my posts have to do, like, I like to point people to either resources or to share something on a deeper level, then it involves a blog. So like there are all of the levels of what's posted, but I'm holding myself to a standard that nobody else is holding me to, right? And what do they say? Like 80% is just showing up.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And reviewing and refining.
Like
the thing is with marketing is there's no big mystery around it. It's literally a good marketeer is someone who just tries and tests their strategy. So a great marketeer is someone actually, that kind of good marketing mindset is someone who is just dynamic in their thoughts. They're willing to, do a month's worth of content and look back and be like, what's worked, what hasn't worked, right? This seems to be working really well, so we're going to do more of that. Something else not as working, so let's just pivot and continue. And you'll see, even with the big brands, they, Google or I'm trying to think of, Nike, they do change their sort of strategy and branding because they evolve. So yeah, just be dynamic and nothing is set in stone when it comes to marketing, nor should it be.
no.
It's
and you can always
journey.
delete it. You can always just delete it.
Yeah, and there is the delete button. Yeah,
there is the delete
True.
button.
True. And
it's available.
There's always going to be a time where a post bombs or it doesn't achieve what you want it to achieve, and that's just kind of it's just life. But the thing to do is to take that information. Okay, well, why did that happen? Utilize it, so it's not a failure; it's just a learning, and apply that to your future social media planning.
Yeah. Well, and that's just like a lot, and that's actually leveraging the emotional intelligence skill of just self-actualizing. So you take that risk, you kind of bridge a little gap, and then you see what happens. You take in the information, which is like a reality testing, like this is the data, this is how much engagement I had, this is how many people saw the post, blah, 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 blah. And then you make a new decision, right?
Yes.
And I suppose when you're consistent, even if you're imperfectly consistent, you have more opportunities to just try stuff out and evolve. So
yeah, you have more information, and you have more connection with your audience. Even if you're showing up imperfectly, you're nurturing an audience, and they're nurturing you back because they're giving you their response to your content. So it's kind of this two-way street, and you're gathering invaluable insights into how you should be marketing your business moving forward. So it's a very, I always see it as a very dynamic process. I mean, I always say to everybody, you must have a strategy. This will take the guesswork out of everything. But then once we've created the strategy, I then say, please bear in mind that we will be reviewing this on a regular basis and adapting it and tweaking and, not changing completely because your audience isn't going to change completely, but definitely tweaking as we move forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's what makes it fun.
Yeah. Well, and what also makes it fun is, and I learned this when I was working with you, is that sometimes you don't have to have the answers when you go into it, right? Sometimes like somebody just saying, let's develop a strategy. Some people will just they want to hide under a rock if they just hear that word, right? Whereas when you actually start looking at the app or the social media channel, it starts to help you refine. So for example, if you're looking at highlights in Instagram, like, oh, well, wait a minute. So what are the things that I want to highlight for my audience? And then that gets you thinking about something, or you start looking at basically when you get into it and you start doing it, even just at a simple level, it triggers new thoughts and it triggers insights about your business. And I actually feel like you don't have to know everything going into it. You learn as you go.
Yeah. exactly. You're living a creative and strategic process. They're kind of very intertwined.
Yeah.
We have another question.
Oh, let's see. Let's see. I work on a project with under-resourced women of color who are starting small businesses, and they have often zero budget for marketing and aren't social media savvy. How should they start? That's a good one for
Let
you,
me
Miss
read
Jen.
that again. So they're starting small businesses and they have a zero budget. Okay, so I would say how should they start is, where are their audience, first of all? And then also, what resources do they have? I mean, obviously you said budget, but it's not just budget, it's time as well in terms of resource. So how much time do they have? That will determine kind of what direction they go in. So they have to ask themselves about their target audience and also their resources as well. And they can, you have to be realistic. If someone comes to me and says, I literally only have an hour or 2 hours to dedicate to social media marketing a week, I have an hour, then I'll be like, fine, we're going to make that work for you. Or you've got no budget, great, we're going to focus totally on organic engagement. That's what we're going to focus on. So it can absolutely be done. And that's the great thing about social media, is it's a democracy in terms of who gets access to it. There are no gatekeepers. Oh, Facebook's a little bit of a gatekeeper, but there are other platforms that are available if you don't want to get into that whole pay to play scenario with Facebook. So it's absolutely the right platforms for them to explore. There's some other questions. What resources can help them learn from the ground up? Well, resources to help them learn. So it would be really great if they just invested in some workshops, but there are also some free resources out there as well. Just following certain blogs, follow my blogs. I've got loads of free advice on my website, and I'll share my website in the comments below. But yeah, so there's loads of free social media resources out there, but even following certain accounts on Instagram, you can pick up loads of tips. And then if they want to solidify that and go the paid route, then obviously there's lots of workshops and courses. I'm going to plug myself here. I also do workshops and courses for small business owners that have a limited budget and really need to empower themselves with that knowledge.
Yeah.
It's, I work with so many people in exactly that position.
Yeah. And Jem is amazing. So one of the things that I do is I follow people that are aspirational as well. And so I follow brands that I connect with. And so whether they're in my same industry or whether they're not in my same industry, I look at brands that I like or thought leaders that I like. And Jem's workshops are amazing. And they basically offer you just like so much information that you can then act on immediately, and you're in a group of people that are supportive. But yeah, we'll make sure that we have links below, and we're not doing this just to like plug Jem, but Jem is awesome. So
well, I have to say it. If I'm saying that there are workshops, I'm like, and I do.
Oh, of course. we're on social media, for crying upstairs, right? You have to like, and your workshops are amazing. So, and the amount, it kind of boggles my mind how much content you offer, even just on your Instagram posts, because your Instagram posts then click to your blog, and all you have to do is bookmark. You click that little bookmark button, and then you can go back to resources that you find supportive. But that's a great question. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So I have
Thanks,
a question
Michael.
for you, Melissa.
Yeah.
And I know that we're probably we're not running out of time, but we're probably coming to the end a little bit, but I do have some questions for you. So
yeah.
Tell me more, like, where are you at in what you're offering right now? Because obviously, like, we haven't sat down and had a good catch up for ages. And obviously I know you're a business coach and you're really into leadership and empowering women in particular. And with the EI, how is that fitting into anything? Is there anything new on the horizon that I just want to learn about?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. So it's a lot of my focus has been more corporate and organizational based. So for example, with the EI work, I do emotional intelligence trainings for either leaders that are like that, it's more specific to people leaders, and or just emotional intelligence training for the general organization where it's open to everybody. One of the things that has one of the benefits of the era that we live in is that now it's just so much more acceptable to hop on seminars, hop on GoToMeeting or Zoom or what have you. And so organizations are offering a lot more of that type of opportunity for their employees, which is great because our emotional intelligence has really been challenged over the past year,
Oh gosh, yeah.
especially living in isolation. So I've been doing a lot of trainings in that respect. Also, I work with an assessment, the EQI 2.0, and it's this really, like, you get a 30-page report. It's governed by the American Psychological Association. It's like this intense, it's not like, it's not like a Cosmo quiz, right? It's like an intense thing, and it looks at how you're using all of your emotional intelligence skills. So sometimes it will either, I'll use that with a coaching client as a one-off to just kind of like better understand emotional intelligence. Sometimes it'll be in conjunction with a training for people. So there's the organizational side of it, and then one-on-one I'm doing that. There's that, the other assessment that I work with is Colby. That's one that I actually did with
Yeah,
you.
I remember.
And
Yes, I
that's
remember
where,
that. That
yeah,
was
and
great
that's where
as
it's just
well.
looking at your instincts. Like these are
Yeah,
these are my problem solving, my coaching and not my coaching instincts, but my problem solving instincts, my communication instincts. And so I use that with most of my clients because then that helps you understand your natural MO and how to work with your grain instead of against your grain.
yeah,
So there's that. But yeah, I'm mainly focusing on emotional intelligence training and women's leadership. I've got women's leadership program that I am working on with Tiara International, and that starts on Wednesday for one of our advertising clients. So that's exciting. That's the third year that we're doing that. So I love that because you get to work with a group of people over the course of like 6 months, and you get to
yeah,
go really deep with them, and then you get to see the impact. So
yeah.
I love that.
So, talking about EI and the pandemic, what would, obviously, everything has been affected by the pandemic. Our, mental health, our everything just seems to be dampened. I've been pretty lucky and pretty buoyant over the last 12 months, but I definitely have felt my creativity being quite squashed by the fact that I haven't had the usual recharges in my life. What would your advice be for people who don't have the usual thing, aspects in their life that kind of nurture their EQ or spark it? What would your advice be to those to people? Well, people like us, basically, because we're still pretty much in lockdown.
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's, when it comes to, like, specifically when you're talking about sparking creativity and keeping the juices flowing, it's looking at what it is for you. So for everybody, it's unique. Like for me, I'm a very physical person. So doing kung fu and doing yoga and working out, like I made sure that I found ways that I could do that over, from my home. And so whether like there's a dance, there's a dance class that I follow, I do yoga, and now Kung Fu is back in session. And so I go live. So, and that, the body mind connection for me is huge. So I make sure that I'm consistent and disciplined with that. And then it's really just looking, it kind of goes to your question, resources, like what are the resources that you have available to you?
Yeah,
So if there is a park by your house, then making sure you get out and get to that park. If you have a pod of people, I know lots of people, especially people that are not living with a family, but that are single, that they created their own pods, right? So that they
yeah,
had some type of social interaction. Some routines. Another thing that really stimulates me is film and storytelling and content, right? So I had a couple of friends and we have a watch party every Sunday night, and we were kind of going through the Marvel, the MCU, like all the Marvel movies. So we watched Infinity
yeah,
War, and we were WhatsApping and chatting the whole time while we were watching Infinity War. And so it's not perfect, right? but it's finding what that unique thing is that does spark you, because it is different for other people,
Yeah.
and for everybody it's different. So it's finding that and then seeing what the best way to bring that into your life is, and not worrying about it being perfect.
Yeah.
That's
But it sounds like it is developing that self-awareness about your needs and how you can translate those into in a way that will still serve you. It may not serve you 100%, but serve you enough to get you through
yeah.
these trying times.
And to be honest, Jem, I think one of the biggest things that has dampened it for everybody is that it's been hard to pause and actually say what actually will feed me in this way,
Yeah.
right? Because it just feels like everything has been compressed, or we're in more of a pressure cooker, and without having that spaciousness to allow yourself to ask the question. And so, put it on your phone, put it on a post-it, put it someplace, just like, what do I need right now to show up how I want to show up? And it
Yeah.
could be a nap, it could be a latte, it could be, going for a walk, it could be 10 push-ups, it could be a plank contest. I don't know what it's going to be for people, but whatever it is. The other thing that I would say is shake things up. Like, do the opposite. Like, if you normally do one thing, just do the exact opposite and just see what happens. Like, nothing is going to collapse on you. I mean, within
Yeah.
reason, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and if you need to switch your phone off and not be on social media for 48 hours, then do that. We don't have to be although I work in that industry, we don't have to be connected all the time. You have to have boundaries, and you have to have boundaries 100% with social
I
media.
did that. I did that I did that quite a few times over the pandemic, because it's weird. The only way that we have this connection is through a screen, right?
Yeah.
Because we can't physically be with certain people. And so you end up doing more of the screen, and then you reach a certain point and then it starts to deplete you. So being aware of that is, I think, huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I had to tell a client today to switch off her notifications on her phone, because she's like, but this is so addictive. And I'm like, switch off those notifications. Whenever you check your social media, you're doing it with intention, okay? And you do not need to be picking it up every time you hear a bing. You just don't need to do that. It will start to seep into your brain, and it will not be good. And she's like, okay, fine, I'm doing it now.
I intention. I love that.
Yes.
Doing things, being intentional. That's huge. And remembering that we are intentional and we are at choice. Yes, Michael, that's exactly the George Costanza. That's exactly what I was thinking in my head. I don't know, Jem, if you remember that Seinfeld episode where Costanza did, whenever he had an instinct to do something, he did the opposite. Seinfeld, whatever he did, turned out even. He even threw a 20 out the window, and Kramer runs back up and has the 20. And then I think, what was Julie Louis-Dreyfus? She did something. I think she just followed her instincts, and new things arise. Anyhow, it was a really interesting episode about balance and instinct from
I think
good old Seinfeld.
I think that's a great tip. Do the opposite. I'm going to try it. Definitely.
Yeah, or just it doesn't have to be the opposite, but just shake stuff up, because life is when life is going like this, you got to shake it up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're in lockdown and every day feels like the same, and time has walked into some kind of weird, sort of, I don't know, other dimension where you're just like, wait, what day is it? Hang on a minute. What year is it even? So yes, I think that is good. It helps to sort of, and whatever it takes to recharge yourself.
Yeah, right. What was it, Mark Maron, who I just adore and still adore? He ended up getting a lot more on social media. But one of the things that and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but it was basically do whatever it takes to keep your mental sanity without hurting other people. Whatever it takes, if it means that you've got your cup of coffee and you need to take whatever it is, do what it takes to keep your mental sanity and to get through this.
Yeah.
Ooh, let's see, we've got another. Oh, go ahead.
I think
no,
also,
go ahead,
self-care is such a buzzword, especially on social media. But actually self-care is just self-awareness. That's what it comes down to. It's just being aware of your needs, and that's it. It's not about hot baths and mani pedis. It's about self-awareness.
Right.
So it's down to EQ or EI, whichever way you want to talk about, whichever way you want to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It's not, I know I hate it when people are like, oh yeah, self-care. Well, I did get my mani-pedi and I did get my massage. And I'm like, that's not what we're talking about. Sometimes it's really just like cleaning out that drawer that really
Yeah,
needs to be cleaned
yeah,
out.
yeah. Doing that thing that you haven't done, but you just need to get it out of your head. So yeah, that's self-care.
Sweep, sweep.
Yeah.
I love sweeping. Sweep the dust bunnies away.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We're going to take one more question and then we'll wrap it up. So
Yeah.
if anybody has any questions while they're here, type them in. And also at any point, you can always DM Jem, you can DM me, and we are happy to get back to you if you have any questions. If you're watching this later and you have questions, just DM us. Okay, let's see. A roadblock for people today is feeling like we need a role model of the same color, gender to inspire them. How can we grow EQ to empower ourselves to see anyone as a role model? That's interesting. That's definitely an empathy thing, and really connecting to other people as humans, right? And I do not work for Marvel. I swear to God, I don't. And what I will say is watching the variety of different superheroes, different genders of superheroes, different races as superheroes, I think it does allow us to connect to like something that's an archetypal story that can really inspire us. But I stop and I think about my friends that have watched straight white people and had to accept straight white people as their role models when they might not be straight and they might not be white, right? And they might not identify with their gender, and they've had to put up with it all of these years.
Yeah.
And so when I stop and when I pause and I think about that, that does hit home. And I feel like just asking the question is a great question.
Yes.
It's asking the question. When I think about being president, it's like, has there ever been a president that's not a man? No, there has not. Can I see myself as president? Well, I don't want that job. But could I see myself as president, or my niece or other women in my life as president? Of course I can. And but it just takes a little bit of a stretch. I don't know. What do you think about that one, Jem?
Well, I think that I don't think there's a sort of right or wrong answer to it. I think that there's so much to be said about it. I think the question's amazing. How can we grow EQ to empower ourselves to see anyone as a role model? I think that there is a need sometimes as a human to feel a sense of belonging, and sometimes if someone is similar to you, you feel that sense of belonging. So I do see that, and the reason I see that and the reason I identify it is that, having kind of lived in America or seen people live in different countries or move about, it's interesting how people of the same, like, for example, I found the expat community, the British expat community, and we kind of congregated together. And there is that sort of sense of needing that, a little bit of that identity. But at the same time, it's gone too far, hasn't it? Because, well, it especially has gone too far with the media and the lack of representation. So I think that there's a lot to be said around that. I'm not sure I could give a concise answer. I think that's a whole other Instagram live.
A whole other, well, it's talking about identity. It's talking about belonging. And it's true. When I lived in London, I did the same thing. It's not like people spoke a different language or anything, but there was something about finding American expats that were living in London that there was a cultural connection. Just like when I meet somebody that went to Indiana University, I'm like, yay, you went to IU. And, or you're a Bears fan. Oh, yay, go Chicago Bears. Like, we like to belong. And it's actually not even a liking thing. It's actually just, that's just how we're wired. So it's all good. Oh, wait a minute. And there was a follow-up. I guess I asked because if there's never been someone of our race, then who will ever be the first? right? There's always a first, Michael. There's always a first.
Yeah.
And so we just have to keep looking for those firsts and inspiring those firsts among us, and also not making assumptions about anybody in any way, shape, or form. Let's just not make assumptions, and let's hold us all to our greatest way of being without doing it in a perfectionist way.
Yeah. Here.
Jem,
Agree
I
with
just want to
everything
reach through
she
the
said.
screen.
I know, I just want to hug you.
I want to reach through that screen. I want to hug you. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I've loved talking to you. I know that we've been meaning to do this for ages, and I've really enjoyed this, and I've really loved talking about social media just from a different perspective. There's so much to be said about, and also learning more about EI, I think, because it's a fascinating topic. But yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for everybody who joined us. And we'll do more Tuesday tips at noon. And maybe Jem will join us again. That would be so great. Yeah. And if there are other topics or things that you want to hear about that would be helpful in terms of leadership and developing yourself as a leader, then let me know. Let us know in the comments. And Jem will put in the comments her website and info. And hey, follow Jem. And if you're a Jem fan, follow me too.
Yeah,
right? We can
please
ask.
do. Yeah.
Okay. Cheers.
Cool.
So great to see you, Jem.
Sending lots of love. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
There we go.